Hey, it's Kate, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make my basic doll dress pattern. And you can find this pattern in my website. I'll link it below. And it's really great for beginners who are wanting to learn some new techniques. And it fits my 15-inch doll body pattern, which is also in my website. So I also have a lot of other tutorials for making cloth dolls, attaching yarn hair, and embroidering doll faces. So be sure to check out my channel and let's get started. So I've started out by tracing all the pattern pieces for the bodice onto 2 layers of calico cotton fabric. That's what I always use for my doll dresses unless I'm making some custom doll. So I'm just cutting these pattern pieces out with 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I know it's kind of hard to see the lines, but they're there, I promise. But yes, I just traced each pattern piece and again cutting with 1/4 inch seam allowance. For one custom doll I made the mistake of using taffeta, which if you've ever worked with taffeta, it can be a total nightmare, especially when you're making tiny doll clothes and having to gather these little skirt pieces. It's not fun. So, wouldn't recommend taffeta for your doll dress, but you've got to try it before you know sometimes, but all right, so now I am tracing my sleeve pattern pieces on the fold, and then I'm going to cut those out on the line, but I will still leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance at the bottom of the sleeve. So I'm looking at the wrong side of the fabric right now. And I also meant to say that the measurements for the skirt piece will be on the first page of your pattern instructions. So now I'm going to pull my pieces apart and I'm going to match up the shoulders of the front bodice piece and the 2 back bodice pieces and sew those at the shoulder with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'll open that up and just press those shoulders open with my hands, and then I'm going to do the lining now, which looks exactly the same. You can use a different color for the lining. You'll just want to layer your lining fabric under your bodice fabric when you're cutting out your pattern pieces. So I'm opening up the second bodice piece, which is the lining, and I'm going to put these 2 pieces together facing each other. And now I'm just going to match up all the edges and corners and pin these together. And I am a pinning minimalist. I don't like to pin. I like to be able to adjust as I go, but I do encourage you to pin as much as you feel is necessary, especially if you're a beginner or just getting started. Pinning can really help to hold everything in place. So I'm sewing up the back of the dress and around the neckline and then back down the other side. And again, I'm just keeping with the 1/4 inch seam allowance as I go. All right, and now I'm just going to trim all the sharp corners and curved edges. I'm going to snip the seam allowance so that when I turn this right side out, all of these seams will lay smoothly. And I am using hemostats. If you're going to make dolls or doll clothes, I highly recommend getting some hemostats. I will link those below as well. And they are just a lifesaver. I can't even tell you how they've changed my doll making experience. They just make everything so much easier and quicker. I use them to stuff my dolls and turn them right side out and turn clothes right side out and everything. So I highly recommend getting some of those. So now I'm going to work on the sleeve. I'm going to start by hemming the bottom of the sleeve just with the tiniest little hem I can. And I'm turning it twice so that I don't have any raw edge there. And sewing these tiny little hems can be tricky. So if you want to start with a scrap piece of fabric and take it to the edge of that piece and then uh, slide your little tiny hem there, you can do that, can help you get started on the tiny hem. So now I'm matching the armpit corner of the sleeve with the armpit corner of the bodice, which has been turned right side out. And I'm using a stitch on my machine that kind of imitates an interlocker or a serger. But if you don't have that, you can use a zigzag stitch or just a regular straight stitch works. But I'm just working my way around this edge and I'm making lots of adjustments as I go. I'll probably do 3 or 4 stitches and then adjust, 3 or 4 stitches and adjust. And this can take practice. Sleeves are not my favorite thing to attach, and you just have to get used to that curve. It can be tricky, but now I'm matching up the bottom edge of the sleeve and I'm just going to sew it to the armpit of the sleeve and just do a little back stitch there. I didn't go down the side because I'm going to put those 2 inner layers together and take the outer layers and open them and sew all the way down that side. And I'm tucking my sleeve out of the way. I will just be sewing the very corner of the armpit of that sleeve into that seam. And now I'm going to open it up and there's the result. So I'm doing the other side. I'm just putting the bottom edges of my sleeve together. And I always start with a back stitch. Back stitch is your best friend. It just keeps things from unraveling. And so I'm again going all the way to the armpit. And then I'm going to keep those inner layers together and open the 2 outer layers. And I'm going to sew down the side. And I'm pulling that sleeve inward and out of the way. I wanted to show you this twice because it can be a little tricky. You can see the sleeve there. I'm pulling it all the way out of the way and I'm just barely snagging the little armpit corner of that sleeve as I sew down that side. And then I fold those layers back together and you can see the result. I'm going to turn these sleeves right side out with my hemostats. Can't say enough about the hemostats. If you watch my tutorials, you'll probably get tired of hearing about them, but I just love them so much. So I'm just trimming up some little thread tails, and there is my bodice. So now I'm going to get started on the skirt piece. I'm going to start by folding in the side edges twice, just with a very tiny little fold, and so I'm closing up these raw edges of the short ends of the skirt piece. I'm going to do the other end, and then I will hem up the bottom edge. I don't really have a measurement for these little folds. They're just as tiny as you can make them. And the bottom edge hem is about a 1/4 inch hem. So I just fold it twice again and sew all the way across the bottom. The doll that I made using taffeta for the dress was a Lydia Dietz doll. And I'm going to make a video about that because it was way outside my comfort zone, but I learned a lot from that project. And one thing I learned was do a test run with your fabric before you commit because some fabrics are unexpectedly difficult. But now I'm sewing two based stitches across the waist edge of this skirt piece, and I'm leaving some thread tails on both sides so that I can gather this. So I'm turning my bodice piece upside down and facing away from me, and I'm taking my skirt piece facing towards me, and I'm going to attach it to that inner lining of the bodice at the waist. And I'm not attaching it to the other side of the bodice, just this lining. And now I'm going to gather, I like to pin it in the middle and then gather one side before I do the other side. So you can see I pinned it in the middle and then I pinned it at the very edge and then I started gathering and pinning. And I just feel like that gives me more control and makes things a little more even. So now I'm doing the other side. I'm pinning it to the edge and I'm going to gather and just get things all evened out. Sometimes I'll hold on to that gathered part and tug down on the skirt so that the gathering will straighten out because the gathering tends to bunch up and be a little unruly. So now I'm going to sew this skirt piece to the waist of the lining. And I'm putting the gathering on the bottom side. And so I'll just hold my finger on that waist edge and tug down on the skirt so that it straightens everything out. And you can see me doing it right there. And I'm just pulling my pins out as I go. I recommend doing that because you don't want a pin in the eye or something. Those pins can break your needle and fly and can be a little dangerous. So I'm doing a back stitch right there at the end. And now I'm just going to get the threads all trimmed and pin the front of the bodice to the waist of the skirt. So I'm starting at the front center, and this helps me keep everything even. I found if I start at the very end and work my way to the middle, by the time I get to the middle, it is uneven. So we don't want that. So I started in the middle, and now I'm coming and trimming my thread tails. There are so many. And I'm going to turn that under at the very end and start pinning towards the center. And once I get to the center, I will start in the other side the same way. And I'm just making sure this is flat and I'm covering up those based stitches. And here I am going to the other side, trimming my thread tails and going to pin the rest of this. I'm just turning that under and hiding all the raw edges and all the gathering and the seams and pinning that in place. And you can sew this by hand, which I'll do in a future video. I'll show you how to do that. But today I'm sewing it with a machine. So I'm just going to start here at the very end and slowly work my way as close to that edge as I can, the edge of the folded edge of the bodice waist. And again, just pulling my pins out as I go. And you may have to give that waist a good tug as you go just to keep it from bunching up. Right, and doing my back stitch, and it's almost done. I love it. I just love this little dress. It's just the perfect little, it looks like a little prairie style dress to me, and I really love it. So I'm just measuring my hook and loop fastener. It's about 5 centimeters, and I'm going to sew this on. And I'm just sewing around the edge of this fastener, and I'm going to overlap my seams so it doesn't come undone. And now I'm doing the other side. I like to use hook and loop fasteners because they're not chokeable, and that's something that I'm a little paranoid about is little pieces that babies can choke on and swallow or little children can. I don't want to take any chances. It's definitely just a personal preference, but I just like knowing that even if it's a doll that's not meant for a child, that it will be safe for a child because sometimes kids love dolls and they could get a hold of one. I don't know. So, anyway, I'm slipping this onto a doll that I had already made, and you can see it just fits perfectly. And I just love how it turned out. So, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again next time. Bye, y'all.